Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakat. Welcome to another lesson. We're just having a recap and conclusion of uh, lesson number 18. That's Tamen. So let's look at the negation in verbs part 1. We've been looking at the negation of verbs using ma and la, and we have looked at ma nafia, which we said can be used in fi'l madi, fi'l madi, and fi'l mudari, and it becomes marfu'un. Let's just take a look at example of that. Fi'l madi, ma dhahabtu ila suk. So ma in this case is fi'l madi, is ma nafiya in fi'l madi. So you can see that it doesn't affect the fi'l itself. It remains in its original case. And it negates the action from the past. Says, I did not go to the market. الفعل المضارع in present tense verb ما نسمع الإخبار. So in this case, we learned that it negates the present time only. Like we're not listening to the news. It refers to the time, like what is happening now. If someone asks, we are not listening to the news now. So it refers to the present time, which is in this case is marfu'un. As you can see, nasma'u will be dhammat, which is in marfu'un. We also learned about la nafiya. La nafiya is in fi'l mudari. It remains marfu'un. The fi'l marfu'un. For example, here la nasma'u. It doesn't change anything, but it changes the meaning if you translate. Because remember, it says we are not listening if it was ma, but when it says la, it negates the action. It's a continuous thing. So it means it doesn't, you don't listen to the news. It's a continuous thing. We do not listen to the news. So here it's negating the present tense verb. Okay, let's look also at la nahiya. La nahiya in when we learned about it turns the fi'l mudari into majzumun, and it becomes a command. If you want to command someone, you say la tajlis huna. That means it's commanding one person, masculine. You command with la tajlis, and it changes the fi'l mudari'u marfu'un into majzumun. Here you can see the difference. Tajlis with a sukun, and here it was dhamma, which is marfu'un. So take note of the changes that happens. Fi'l mudari'u mansubun. We will learn about this, inshallah. Learn this negates the future, the action that will happen in future. For example, it's lan adhaba. You see, lan adhaba ila suk haddan. It means in future, which is tomorrow, you are not going to the market. So it changed the fi'al mudari marfu'un into mansubun. As you can see, this lan is one of those negation that changes the fi'l marfu'un into mansubun. So take note of how line affects the fi'l itself. So we now have one that is marfu'un, other one is majzumun, and other one that is mansubun. Okay, let's have a quick look of some of the modes of fi'l mudari. We do have 3 modes of fi'l mudari, which is marfu'un, mansubun, and majzumun. So we do have particles. If precedes fi'lun, changes that fi'lun from fi'l marfu'un into mansubun or majzumun. Let's just take a look. Some of these we have already highlighted them in previous lessons. Huwa yaf'al. If it is marfu'un, it's yaf'al bidamat. You remember 5 in the pocket of al-Arabiya. So we know this. Let's have a look at this. We have this one in yellow. yaf'al, huwa yaf'al, and we have taf'alu, which is here taf'alu, anta taf'alu, and af'alu, naf'alu. These ones, if you if you see, they take the same pattern of af'alu. So, and all of them, they are marfu'un. And when we see, when they are in marfu'un, they behave like this. And when we are talking of huma yaf'alan, this is at some time you see this nun can be there, and sometimes it can disappear in some instances, but still in marfu'un. We will learn about the cases where sometimes you have yaf'ala, but it is to be marfu'un, but without nun. So it can come, it can go, but still remains marfu'un. So okay, let's look at some of the stuff alani. We've got 1, 2, taf alan, and taf alu, and taf alina, taf alan. Okay, you know, all of these, we just want to emphasize some of the few things here in this lesson, but you know this because we've already done that. Let's look at mansubun. The particles that changes the fi'lun in from marfu'un into mansubun, we have an, li, lan. These particles, if you see them preceding a verb, the chances are the verb is mansubun. So take note of this: an, yaf'ala, liyaf'ala, lan yaf'ala, and so on. So this is it. All of these, as you can see, they become mansubun. Mansubun is this one, this fatha changes from dhamma. So dhamma to fatha becomes mansubun. Majzumun, we have la nahiya. Remember, la nahiya, it changes the verb itself into a command to say la taf'al. So it changes la taf'al if you want to command someone not to do something, la taf'al. So we call that la nahiya. And lam as well changes, and lama, we'll learn about this inshallah, but let's take a look at some of the modes, what we have already learned in some examples. Yadhab, if you are asked to give the irab, this is the irab of the fi'l itself, yadhab. Yadhab, so it's fi'l mudwari'u marfu'un bidammat aina fa'ilun damirun mustatirun taqdiruhu huwa. So the fa'ilun in this case is hidden. Remember, when we talk of the fa'ilun, why do we mention the fa'ilun? Because every fi'lun must have the fa'ilun. It might not have, some verbs might have maf'ulun bihi, but in this case, the verb doesn't have maf'ulun bihi. It is fi'lun lazim, doesn't have maf'ulun bihi. So we have to have 2 of the 3 that is expected from fi'lun. In this case, the fi'lun itself, the verb, and the fa'il, which is the doer of the verb. So in this case, the doer of the verb is hidden, and we assume that the person whom we are talking about is huwa. That's why we say mustatirun taqdiruhu huwa. It refers to huwa. So so this is particle an yadhaba. We remember we said the particle an is a particle of mansubun. Or we can say adat nasbin is in the particle of mansubun. Okay, it gives the condition of a verb into mansubun. So fi'lun mudari'u, it remains fi'lun mudari'u. Remember, don't confuse this. The coming of an doesn't change the status or the mode of the verb, or it remains mudari'u, which is present tense verb. Mansubun in this case no longer marfu'un. Why? Because adat nasbin is preceded the verb. So it's now mansubun bil fatah, and you can see the fatah, the presence of the fatah. That's what we are talking about. And where is the fa'il? Remember, we need to identify, because this verb is fa'il lazim, which means it doesn't have maf'ulun bih, but it does have a fi'lun and a fa'ilun. So where is the fa'ilun? The fa'ilun, tamilun, mustatun, takdiru, huwa. So here it's negating, it's an yadhaba, which is this particle of mansubun, but remains marfu mudari. Okay, let's look here at yadhabuna. Yadhabuna is fi'lun mudari marfuun bitubut nun. Bitubut nun means with nun, with the presence of nun. Where's the fa'ilun? Fa'ilun taqdiruhu hum. The wow. This wow. This wow, we call it wow jama, but taqdiruhu hum. So the verb here is yadhabun. Fi'lun, fi'lun mudari. This wow is representing the fa'il. And this nun is representing the mode of the verb itself. So in this case, we say marfu'un bi to both. That's why it says bi to both nun. So it means marfu'un bi to both nun. So it means to both nun is part of marfu'un. So take note of that. So why we put this nun, and when the nun comes, and in some instance the nun goes. Let's look at here why the nun has gone. An yadhabu, an yadhabu. This is still fi'l mudari'u mansubun bi hadif nun. Now hadif is opposite to both. To both, hadif are opposite. To both means present, hadif means deleted or removed. So here the nun is removed. Why? Because the verb is now in mansubun form. And where is the fa'ilun? The fa'ilun is wow. Wow still remains the fa'ilun. In this takdiruhu yes. And here let's look at tadhabina. Tadhabina and tadhabin. When we are addressing a feminine present, what we say? Fi'l mudari'u marfu'un bitubut nun. The presence of nun as well, because in some instances you won't see nun. So with tubut nun. And the fa'ilun is ya takdiru ant. So this ya is the fa'il. It's not mustatir. Remember, what you should know the difference between mustatir and the presence of. In this case, when you see a ya, it means the fa'ilun is present. And when you see a waw, the fa'ilun is present. But here, the fa'ilun is not present. That's why we are saying mustatirun. There's no letter that represents the fa'ilun, but we assume or we know from the background of it that it is referring to huwa. But in this case, we know that the ya is referring to ant. So it's takdiruhu ant, but the ya present is the fa'il. Okay. Let's look here at when the nun disappears. Nun goes. An tadhabi, an tadhabi, an tadhabi. Fi'al mudari mansubun fi hadhif nun. Aina fa'ilun? Fa'ilun ya taqdiruhu ant. So you see now the verb is being preceded by an particle, which is adat nasbin, the particle that changes the fi'alun into fi'al mansubun, into mansubun. It removes the nun. Why do we remove the nun? Because remember, the nun in this case, it was the mode of the verb marfu'un. So in this case, it's no longer marfu'un. That's why we remove nun. So it becomes antadhabi, because nun is the mode, it's not the file. So take note of this. Nun is not the file, it's the mode of the field. So in this case, we remove nun. Okay. Let's have a quick look at some of the modes again here. We were looking at, okay, let's continue. Adhabu, fi'l mudaru, marfuun, bidamat. Where is the fa'ilun? Fa'ilun damirun, mustatun tagru. And you can have a look at this one. We don't have a letter that represents the fa'ilun. That's why we are saying it's damir, mustatun. It's a hidden pronoun. It's a hidden. The pronoun is there, but it's hidden. And it refers to ana. And this harf al-hamza is harf mudari. We are asked to, where is this? Why is this alif? This is harf mudariya, which refers to ana. Okay. Let's look at an adhaba. This is fi'l mudari. Mansubun bi fatah. Bifata, this fata is that the one we are referring to is mansubun. This is the sign of mansubun. Where's the fa'ilun? Damir, mustatun, takdiru, ana. Why? Because we don't have a letter in this case that we can say this one is representing the fa'ilun. It's only hidden here. So we assume it's an ana. Yadhab, yadhabna, yadhabna. That's هنا يذهبنا. فعل مضارع مبني على السكون في محل رفع. Okay, let's have a quick analysis on this يذهبنا. This is فعل مضارع, still present tense verb, and it's مبني. What is مبني? It's fixed. When we say a verb is mabniyun, it means it's fixed. It cannot decline. It cannot decline to be mansubun. Okay. It cannot decline, let's say, to be fata, or to be tanwin, or to be marfu'un tam. You cannot have that in this word. So we say fi'al mudari mabni ala sukun. Always this fi'al will end with a sukun as long as we have hunna, nun. This nun is the fa'il. Is the fa'il taqdiru hunna. So you always see the verb here ends with a sukun. Whether it's mansubun, marfu'un, majzumun, it always ends with a sukun. Let's take a look at an yadhabna. As you can see, yadhabna. This is fi'al mudari, mabniyun ala sukun. Even when you're waking up from sleep, you just say fi'al, this is mabniyun ala sukun. It doesn't change. Whether it's madi, mudari, majzumun, it doesn't change. It remains mabniyun ala sukun. Fi mahal nasbi. In this case, it's nasbi. So you need to identify by putting fi mahal nasbi in place of nasbi. So it's fi mahal in place of nasbi. So you are actually specifying that this doesn't change, whether it's marfu'un or mansubun. But our understanding that this fi'lun is mansubun because it's preceded by particle of nasb. So you need to give us this sentence fi mahal nasb, fi mahal rafa. Because if we don't put this, we don't know whether this is mansubun or this is marfu'un. So it needs to be mentioned in the i'rab. Okay. Tadhabuna. This fi'l mudari marfu'un bitubutinu. Where's the file? File waw takdiru antum. Look at this. The verb itself ends with a dhamma. That's why we are saying marfu'un bitubut. Marfu'un. This is bidhamma. But here, why bitubutinun? Because this nun is a sign of marfu'un. That's why we're saying bitubut nun. And this waw is a sign of fa'il. Don't forget this. It's a sign of fa'il. That makes that we refer as antum. Okay. I think we are going to we are not going to proceed here. We are going to end here as we in next lesson we are continuing to look at the modes. We're not in Medinah book 2 and identify some of these things that we are already looking at. Let's look at this and before we close. An tadhabu. This is fi'l mudari. Mansubin bi hadif nun. Mansubin hadif nun. Why did we remove nun here? Because we understand that nun is a sign, is a mode of fi'l. So when we remove it, it makes this fi'lun mansubun. So if we say فعل مضارع منصوب بحذف النون فاعل الواو تقديره أنتم. In this case is antum. So this is mansubun because a particle of nasbin precedes the verb. Okay. So we will be looking at some of the modes of the verbs. There are quite a number as we look at some of the particles that we've already learned. So if you actually check as we conclude, let me conclude with this because next we are going to learn new particles, inshallah. So let's conclude with this tadhaban. تذهبان فعل مضارع مرفوع بثبوت نون. فعل الفاعل where's the فاعل ألف تقدره هما مؤنث أو أنتما. So here as you can see ثبوت نون again. Why? Because this is sign of مرفوع. And where's the file? The file is this, which represents huma, mu'annath, or antuma. So you can have antuma, tadhaban, or huma, tadhaban, which is mu'annath. Okay. And when we remove nun, we bring an tadhaba fi'al mudari mansubun bihadif nun fa'il الفاعل الألف تقديره هما مؤنث أم أنتم أنتما. So this is it. You remove nun because nun is a mode of marfu'un. So we remove it so that the verb itself becomes mansubun. تذهبنا. Remember مبني فعل مضارع مبني على السكون في المحل رفع because it's always بالسكون على السكون and مبني. And where's the filing? Filing nun taqduruhu antunna. And here is we call it nun niswa because it only represents feminine. Antadhabna. Remember, mabniyun ala sukun. But in this case, it's fi'l mudari. Mabniyun ala sukun fi mahal nasbin. Why? Because we do have adat nasbin preceding the verb itself, fi'l mudari. Okay. تذهب فعل مضارع مرفوع بالضمة الفاعل where's the فاعل ضمير مستتر تقديره هي أو أنت. So in this case we don't have a letter that represents the فاعل, so we say مستتر تقديره أنت وهي. So take note of this. And when we make it mansubun by bringing an, it becomes antadhaba. Don't forget to say antadhaba because that ba, that fatha, is denoting the mode of the verb. So it's fi'l mudari mansub. Now in mansubun case because of that ba. Bi fatha. Fa'il, where's the fa'il? Damir mustatun taqdiruhu hiya and. So take note of this, how they end. So in this case, this is the modes of the fi'l, fi'l mudari. In next lesson, inshallah, we are going to look in the Medinah book, as we look in the new topic, and also emphasize. If you haven't grasped the concept, just hang on. We are going to repeat it again and again as we keep on moving with the concept. See you in the next class as we move on with Medinah Book 2. Jazakallah khairan. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.